Okay, great. Okay, everyone, welcome to the Tuesday, October 8th, 2024 Curriculum Committee meeting. If it's Tuesday at 5 o'clock and we are in this building, it is a Curriculum Committee meeting. So welcome back for those of you who are seeing us again. So I'm the committee chair, Andrew Babson. We have Claire Girton with us, Liz Duffy, Janie Lau, our superintendent, Ken Batchelor, Jessica Koo, and Janae Peterson with us here. And of course, Dr. Sean Dukevich will be presiding over our agenda items in a bit. I've been informed that there is no recorded public comment, but is there any live public comment? I won't even go say going once or twice. I'll just, that'll be it. Okay. So review of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to have a look? Copacetic? Good? Okay. All right. Well, with that, over to you, Dr. Dukevich.
Thank you, Dr. Babson, and good evening. Well, with the Phillies and Mets Game 3 starting in just a mere minutes, we'll have to compare ratings after this on our YouTube channel. Going to guess that they're going to win.
Yeah.
Could be a close call, but we'll check that tomorrow. So we have a few agenda items we're going to go through briefly, and then I'll pause for questions from the board. On tonight's agenda, we have 2 student clubs at Radnor High School, Hearts of Music and Music Production and Creativity Club. Both obviously are geared toward what you would guess, music. There's also the annual review and acceptance of grant funds from our tremendously generous and supportive Radnor Education Foundation, this year in the total of $100,000. The grant fall cycle actually is starting now. It's in process. And I know that Ms. Duffy and I have a meeting tomorrow for their first board meeting of the year. There's several approvals here for upcoming overnight trips that span really the next few months. This includes expected trips for our band, Model Congress, Model United Nations at the high school, and our annual 5th grade trip to Camp Canadensis in May. Finally, there are 2 affiliation agreements for student-teacher placements for the board to review. So at this time, I'll pause for any questions.
Thank you. So go around the horn, Ms. Girton.
I do not have any questions on this.
Okay, Ms. Duffy, maybe about ref? No. Any other comments? Okay.
Shout out to Rep, though.
Yes, absolutely. For that generosity, it makes a difference. Ms. Lau? No? Okay. I'm noticing what look like some very exciting trips. So congratulations to everyone involved in, a number of very exciting and what look like very enriching trips. Student representative, Janae? Okay, excellent. Okay,
I
that's
just
it.
wanted
Yes,
to
please.
reference that Model Congress is going to Yale for the first time, so that's exciting.
That is exciting.
They've never been to that conference, so
Okay.
that's exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and in terms of the other items as well, I think there's no further comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. So at this time, I'd like to transition to our next agenda item, which is an update to our work with our transition and implementation of the STEEL standards. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Kearney and Dr. Hand to the center table here. Both Dr. Hand and Dr. Kearney are co-leading this initiative, along with me as well. And we're going to help share this update to the board. This should seem like a common topic. We've reviewed this twice before. In the past, though, it was really informational and then a recommendation to the board for approval of our IDS special, which was specific to K-5. Tonight is really a K-12 look and some new things that relate to what we're doing in middle school and high school related to the science and ed tech areas, and also some work we're going to be partnering with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit as a partner in this work to be sure we're aligning what we think is the right thing, but also with experts in our region. So the presentation is now up, and we're going to pretty much take this in thirds. The update that you'll see on the screen and in your packet there will cover this agenda, which includes a look back to where the STEEL standards came from, how they're aligned with the next generation science standards, how the STEEL standards represent a pedagogical model shift, very different from what we've done in the past, a little bit of background there, and even a STEEL's example. Then we're going to talk about our timeline, not only from Pennsylvania, but how it's trickled down to Radnor. And as I just mentioned, how we're going to be partnering with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit to support our work. And then we'll open it up for questions. So a quick look back. We shared this last October, I believe it was. The STEEL standards they came from the Next Generation Science Standards, which are now just over 10 years old. Pennsylvania was one of the last states to adopt them formally and then move them into their version. This graphic on the screen now represents, in total, the NGSS model, which is a three-dimensional model. It includes mainly three pieces. One, the disciplinary core ideas, that's the science content. Two, science and engineering practices, so it's a lot more of an experimental, hands-on approach, a lot of engineering practices involved. And third, cross-cutting concepts, which are the practices, the dispositions, things that students do in the science and the engineering process. And those span all sciences. They're not just exclusive to one area. Again, we've seen the same slides, so not to read these to you, but you can see here some background on how the steels were created through the Pennsylvania process. Much of this work actually occurred right prior to the pandemic and actually continued through the pandemic. But again, not to read this to you, you can see how the state took an approach where brought together a lot of experts from around the country, mostly from the state level, professors at the college level, many teachers and administrators from all over the Commonwealth to develop these standards, again, from the NGSS. This is just a picture of what a foundation box or an example lesson plan could be created from. You'll notice that in many cases, those three areas are represented. You can see here in the three different colors. But the critical piece of the pedagogical model with STEELS and the NGSS is how these three areas come together. They're not distinctive. They're not taught separately. They're intertwined with a purposeful methodology. So as you can see here, a quick timeline for Pennsylvania. Once these standards were developed and approved formally, they were published in 2022 with an implementation goal of next fall. So just like us, districts across the Commonwealth are preparing. Some have already implemented in different ways. They may have gone about it in a different way, but the methodology we chose, which we feel very strongly about, we will be prepared to implement K-12 next school year. And again, as I mentioned, the conceptual shifts with STEELS, it's not just replacing a standard with a higher level standard or adding some type of science that never existed before. We know that the science has always been there. It's really, again, combining these three areas purposefully. A lot of the science here is performance-based. It's not just content regurgitation. So yes, we have labs now. Yes, we do a lot of project-based learning in our high school, middle school, and elementary. But the expectations and how students are assessed is really highly concentrated on performance. The other nice thing about the STEEL standards are they're integrated with college or career readiness standards, also our mathematics and ELA standards. So there's a common connectedness between all of them, which it helps greatly when we're trying to make connections between the disciplines across all of our subject areas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hand to speak to what our plan is at Radnor.
So thank you. We're taking a look in two different buckets. I know Dr. Batchelor likes buckets. So two different areas, looking at the K-5 program as well as looking at our 6-12 program. And we have different kinds of flexibilities within each of those programs. The K-5 program, and as Dr. Dukevich shared about the NGSS and the STEEL standards, is that they're interrelated. And we have a really unique opportunity to interrelate all of those content areas instead of separating them out. So as a refresher, what we'd like to do at the elementary program is to enhance our Innovation Design Studio class. So actually be able to run that twice within the 6-day cycle where students would go to IDS twice and bring the science standards into IDS. So they're working on the full STEELS package, working on science and technology as well as the science components, or excuse me, technology and engineering as well as the science components. What we would do then is have 2 teachers in each building instead of 1 IDS teacher. One would run the K-2 program and the other 3-5. But they wouldn't be separate. It wouldn't be science for one of the IDS and then technology and engineering for the other IDS. They would be together. It might not be at the same time, but those concepts would meet and talk about those areas twice. So that's the K-5 program. In 6-12, we're looking at our current science classes and how they map to these STEEL standards, as well as our integrated classes, which touch on science and technology, as well as our tech ed classes and how they map to the STEEL standards. And I will talk a little bit more about the K-5 program. Dr. Kearney will talk a little bit more about the 6 to 12 program, and we'll share some of the action steps and next steps that we have for each of those. So for, again, that K-5 program, the real benefits of that is, number one, just integrating, like we said, but also additionally is it allows for that the STEEL's content and standards specialization expertise, where you have one teacher who is teaching all of those areas of science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability all together in one class. So you have 6 teachers rather than over 130 teachers teaching science. You have 6 teachers who are really focused on that content specifically. So it allows them to focus, and it also allows us to focus resources, building out higher end science labs and having more science resources. And then instead of, again, 130 small plastic magnifying glasses, we can get 30 really good high-end microscopes. We can invest the funds a little bit differently, so it allows for that kind of specialization. Secondly, it also allows for increased ELA and mathematics time, so our classroom teachers will no longer have to focus, and they will no longer have to be subject area experts on ELA, math, science, and social studies. If we can take that science away from them, it allows them to focus more and be more content focused and specialized, but also allows more time, since they don't have to focus on science during their classroom or homeroom time working with that teacher. Additionally, for the teachers themselves, it allows, again, them to have more flexibility when they're focusing just on ELA and math with folding in some social studies, but more so giving them some time when there's that extra block of IDS. They have more time for cross-collaboration and instructional planning as well, so that they can develop higher quality lessons. So it actually returns some more time back to that classroom and homeroom teacher as well. So, action steps for us. This will actually be our 3rd presentation that we've done before the curriculum committee. The first one was 1 year ago, almost to the day, and then we had done another one in January, and October 24 brings us to our 3rd presentation. We're also going to continue to work on our communicating with our classroom teachers, communicating this out to this committee as well as the full board, sharing what that looks like with our IDS teachers as well. At that K-5 level, our current 3, and then as we look towards another 3. And then broad areas as we go into preparation, we're going to be preparing for the PSSAs. So the PSSAs for science will move to 5th grade. So this is the first year. They're actually piloting this year the STEEL's content. It is not necessarily reportable or attributed to folks as they're piloting this, so it's not attributable back to teachers, but it will be piloted this year, and then ongoing will be in 5th grade. So this is a preparation year, so we're going to be preparing for that. We're going to continue to prepare our curriculum, and I'll share a little bit more about that in the next slide about the next steps. Preparing those resources. What are the resources we're going to need to order for the start of the 25-26 school year? Seems like we're just starting the school year, but we're beginning to think about that when we have 2 IDS and they're focusing on science. What do the resources look like? And then, of course, preparing the professional development as well, or things on which we're going to be working, as well as taking a look at that master schedule. How do we bring in that extra 50-minute block, and how do we open up that time for teachers, and what does that look like for some cross-teacher collaboration across grade level, but also with those IDS teachers being able to work with some of the classroom teachers as well. So, our next steps for IDS, what they look like, is we have professional development time in November where we're going to be working with the IDS teachers. So we're going to be working with the MCIU, or the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, and they're going to be working with the IDS teachers specifically on the STEEL standards. We've already had some time where we've worked with our 3 IDS teachers on the STEEL standards, but this is a much deeper dive, bringing in some outside expertise. They've also begun to map their current standards, the things that they're teaching in technology and engineering, as well as science, and aligning those standards to the STEEL standards. So making sure that the good content that we've been doing across the years still fits in those good lessons, but also making sure that we're covering all of those standards. Because when you look across science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, right, those are a lot in sustainability. Those are a lot of standards. So how do we fit those in through our K-5 program and finding the right mappings for those across the different types of projects that they're doing. They're actually working on that right now. Again, the MCIU, part of their professional development in November and then ongoing into the spring, as our IDS teachers begin to develop that curriculum, they're actually going to share that curriculum with the MCIU. So they're going to develop basically a prototype unit and provide that to the MCIU in November so we can get some outside eyes on it. So what does it look like? So as much as Dr. Kearney and I can look at and review, we want to bring some outside expertise, sort of inter-rater reliability. Like, let's get some outside eyes on this curriculum, one really strong unit, and then go back, develop a few more units, provide that to the MCIU, and have that kind of feedback loop where we can be developing that process right now. And then in the spring, we're going to talk more about having 3 new IDS teachers. There might be some internal interest in that as well, but looking at the spring going into the summer so we can bring them aboard so that they can continue and have some say into the curriculum as well. So as we hire really good people, as we always do, we can bring them in and they can bring their expertise as well. So that's our K-5 IDS or Enhanced IDS or IDS Plus. We really don't have a good name for it right now. But that's what our code name has been, IDS Plus, for K-5. And Dr. Kearney, our 6 to 12 program?
Thank you. At 6 to 12, we don't have the same structural changes that are taking place at the elementary level. We're still departmentalized. We do have integrated courses at the middle school that teach science, but we do have teachers who are much more specialized in science and tech ed instruction, for that matter, going 6 through 12. So these teachers have had the opportunity to begin orienting themselves and developing their understanding of both what Pennsylvania was looking to do, but also the much more established next generation science standards starting back in September of 2021 and going from there. So they've had some in-service opportunities to not only orient themselves to the new standards, both in the previous drafts and the existing versions, go through some in-house Schoology coursework to orient themselves to not just the standards, but instructional practices and resources aligned with those standards. We also brought in a professor from Villanova University who worked with their secondary science and integrated teachers on 2 in-service days to talk about instructional practices aligned with the next generation science standards, And then our teachers began changing our curriculum and common assessment documents, particularly once we got a clearer sense of what the STEELS standards themselves would look like. So beginning back in April of 2024 and then continuing through this summer and into this fall, our 6 through 11, because we really go with biochem and physics up through 11th grade or so, depending where students take it, those teachers have been developing the curriculum and common assessment document. So they are a little bit further along, I think, than where our K-5 is, but this work is still ongoing as well, and that's taking us to a lot of our next steps that we see happening. With upcoming in-service time in October and November, but then beyond that most likely, our teachers are going to continue to refine those documents, not just for the grade level courses, but for the advanced level at the middle school and then honors level at the high school as well. But similarly to at the K-5 level, we do want to get the outside eyes on these documents and get some feedback from those. So we do anticipate that once we finalized our agreement with the MCIU, that we're going to be sharing with them the grade level curriculum documents and the grade level common assessments to get their feedback, and which we will share with our teachers to incorporate. We're also going to use that feedback to develop the professional development that we think our teachers might need, but also the professional development during an upcoming in-service day that the MCIU is going to provide for us. So that's going to be a bit of a formative assessment to get a sense of where we are with those documents and our understanding of STEELS standards. We also want to get some input from our teachers, recognizing that this isn't, they're not starting at square one. They've been working at this for some time. What do they feel like they need to take the next step? And that's something that's going to be happening later in the school year. We anticipate that we will be certainly ready for the implementation of the STEELS standards next fall, but it'll probably be an ongoing process. I think we've seen so far that our teachers' understanding of these standards has developed and will continue to develop, just as ours does. And as they're living with it and seeing how these areas integrate, we anticipate there'll be further evolutions in what our curriculum and instruction look like aligned with those standards. But all in all, I think we're in a good place, and it feels a lot more real now than it may have a few years ago because it's on the cusp of implementation, but also hopefully that means the Phillies scored. But also, we see that with the PSSA assessment changing and ultimately the bio-keystone assessment changing to some degree or another, we expect that's going to bring home a lot more of what this really looks like in practice. We are still waiting for some more information from the state about not just what is being assessed, but what the assessment items look like, et cetera. So there's more for everyone to learn when it comes to steels and what it means for our students and our teachers.
Questions and discussion?
Excellent, thank you both. Speaking of science and engineering, it said that there was water detected on my USB connector. That's what that was about. I literally never heard that before, so, but, you know, a little bit of engineering, yeah, maybe I would learn about it. How about some comments or questions from our panel? Let's see.
It's really great to see the progression of the Steels presentation from, I happened to be at the meeting when you started it whenever that was, October, right? So it's really great to see continuing on that. I just had a quick question on why Montgomery County IU? What was the connection there?
Yeah, it's a really good question, but obviously there are other IUs, and DCIU is our home IU. We have worked with them in the past, and we've worked with some of the specific people who are going to be looking at these curriculum documents and providing professional development. Those teachers who they had worked with previously, both at a leadership level at the building, but also hands-on during in-service time, have responded very well to them, so we had confidence in what they would have to bring. We don't believe they're the only people who would be able to add value to the work that we're doing, but we thought that they would be a good selection.
Is there a specific focus with the MCIU that they're kind of ahead of the game in this area?
Yeah, I don't know if that's fair to say or not. I think we feel confident that they have a good understanding of the steel standards and have provided some high quality professional development in the past. But I think all the IUs are offering support to various school districts in various ways. So it's probably they're not alone in that, I would say. I don't know if you have anything to add.
And then one other question is, you mentioned it may be too early for it, but you mentioned the piloting in the K through 5 that's going on right now. Is there any immediate feedback from teachers?
Were you asking, that may have been the piloting of the 5th grade PSSA this year?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So did I misunderstand? So.
There's no changes to IDS or our science in K
Okay.
through 5 this year. The 5th grade PSSA is going to be piloted this year. That will include steels aligned items.
Okay.
So at this point, no changes, but we expect that we'll have some consideration of that as we get a little closer and get more information from the state.
Thank you for that clarification.
Great. Stuffy?
Can I just jump in? Is it?
Absolutely, yeah.
I apologize, I probably know the answer. Is it their field testing questions or are they piloting questions in the PSSA this year? Is it a field test of the questions? Because it all goes into effect in 2026, correct, officially?
Yeah, I think they're saying that they're field testing questions. It does not count for accountability purposes this
Right.
year. It goes into effect 2026.
Okay, so they're field testing and then for districts to prepare, and then it changes officially over to reflect the standards in the 2026 assessment. Okay.
That's correct. That's our understanding. And I think it's also for them to get feedback and understand how the items work, as well as how did students because these students who take it in 5th grade will have taken the previous PSSA in 4th grade. So they'll be able to at least do some analysis to see how did the same students do on 2 versions of the test.
Okay. Ms. Duffy?
Yes, thanks for the update. I agree with Ms. Girton. It's great to see the progression and how much we've moved forward, and I feel a renewed sense of gratitude for the IDS program that we implemented several years ago, because it seems like we put ourselves in a really good position at the elementary level. Curious, when you say 3 new hires, so will that be 1 new hire per elementary school?
So it'll be 3 new positions. There might be some people internally who would be interested in those positions as well. But they would be, yes, 1 per elementary school. So there would be 2 IDS teachers, a K to 2 and a 3 to 5 at each elementary building.
Great, that's it. Thank you.
Sloan?
I guess I have a comment and then a couple of questions, and I would echo Ms. Duffy's comment, and I've made this at previous meetings as well. I just want to commend the administration for your foresight in anticipating the direction in which, this this type of learning is going with IDS, kind of anticipating the enhanced focus on the applied sciences and then also promoting the interdisciplinary approach. And I just realized that this is kind of a nice introduction for our K through 5 students to kind of our, later integrated, offerings at the middle school and the high school. So I thought, so I don't know if you communicate with your peers at other school districts who don't have something like IDS already to build upon. Is this, like for us, relatively speaking, is this a lighter lift than perhaps other school districts who maybe have to do more building from scratch in order to comply with these new standards? And then my other question is, I guess, at the end of the day, at the end of this process, even if it's not mandated by the state, do we have some idea of like how will we be able to conduct a check at that time to see have we implemented this effectively? I guess, what do we have? I know we still have a lot of time, but in your mind, what would be a good way for us to, after all of this is done, to kind of check and just, see did we do this right? Is it actually, bettering, outcomes for our students in the science area?
So I'll take those backwards. So the self-checks would not only be looking at those PSSA scores, but what the state has done for those PSSA tested subject areas is they've actually developed diagnostic tools. So they've developed diagnostic as well as benchmark tools. One they call the CDT, the other one is a new one called Firefly. So we can actually use those as measurements along the way. So they're not tests, they're benchmarks that allow teachers to be able to better drive their instruction. How far along are my students? Are they obtaining the concepts that I'm there? So I can now tailor and adjust. So we can use those diagnostic and benchmark tools along the way, but we'll also have those PSSA results. And I think we'll see a lot of good anecdotal data as well, like we saw with IDS. We saw the passion and enthusiasm that came from those kids. And I think that's important as well, honestly, to see that love of learning. And I think through that, they will want to learn more. So yes, we will have some quantifiable data, but I think there'll be a lot of good qualitative things from there as well. As far as other districts and sharing out, I know there have been a few other districts who have come to see our IDS program and have asked us about that. And I think the challenge for them, other districts, might be looking at putting a lot of those STEEL standards into their current science curriculum. And that's a whole reframing. And we would be asking our teachers to revise their science curriculum as they're undergoing an ELA revision right now and looking at ELA for next school year. They would be looking at ELA and STEELs within the classroom. So again, if we can focus that, but how does a classroom that doesn't have an IDS program, that might just have library, wellness, phys ed, in addition to that, asking the classroom teachers now to take on technology and engineering in addition to science, a whole new science program, I think would be a lot for other school districts and for those teachers in those districts. So I think we're doing this in a very unique way. Not only do we have a very unique IDS program, but we're expanding it. I think a lot more school districts will actually want to come and see, and a few of them have even reached out in the early stages and asked us about that, since we've done a few presentations or have been at conferences and be like, hey, we're expanding IDS. And they're like, ooh, tell me more.
But I do think that question is such a good question to everything we do, that we need to make sure we evaluate it. And then we also have to be willing to, we feel it makes a lot of sense. We've been looking at this for the last couple of years. We do have the luxury that IDS was already in place, and it was very successful. We joked it became the most popular, not to disparage phys ed in the elementary, but phys ed is always the most popular. And when we put IDS in, the kids were torn. Like, we love both phys ed and we love IDS. It just became so popular with our students. But we need to evaluate it, and we need to be willing to say, what did work and what didn't work. I think that's going to be an important component of this as we move forward, because one of the things we have discussed is that, there are some teachers who have enjoyed being able to teach science. And so now they're going to have more time focused on language arts, and they're going to have more time on math. That is a benefit of this. And we also believe that we may have some internal teachers who might be interested in teaching this, too.
Yeah, and speaking to that and the spark of a love of learning, I could also see moving forward how this might in the long term, change maybe some of our course offerings at the high school, because if we are more STEM focused or technology driven, maybe and I think it's kind of a perfect timing that we're going to look at other districts for best practices, or other high performing districts, because I would think that maybe looking at it through this lens, a Steele's lens, would also be beneficial, because maybe we get some ideas. Thanks.
Okay, well, my first question about Steele's when it emerged was, what happened to the M? What happened to STEM? All the acronyms, STEM, STEAM, Steele's. And so I was thinking about it, and math is, especially at higher academic level, it's so theoretical, and it's really about models and kind of tinkering with kind of structures separate from practice. And so I really see this, I've come to understand Steele's as really looking at the practice of science and scientific practices and disciplines. And what I love about this, it's almost like emerging science and psychology that shows that the typical model in psychology has been that you have a thought and then you have an action, or you have a thought and then you have a feeling and then maybe an action, right? But actually, newer science and psychology shows that it's studied this phenomenon of an action can create a feeling or can create a thought. So in order to perhaps engender new thoughts or feelings, you actually sort of force someone to do a positive action, which can then engender a new feeling or thought. And it seems that way with IDS, is that you're getting kids into doing the activity of science without necessarily having to serve up the core concepts, right? So that's kind of how I think of, like, why did poor math get left out? Because sorry?
Art did too.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah, we'll get into that maybe. But anyway, so I think that it's very innovative to do IDS. My daughter, who's now in 4th grade, has loved IDS. She's very creative, very artsy, but she is a kind of systems thinker. She likes to, create, right? And so anyway, I personally am a big fan of IDS, and I think that it's serving as the foundation, and then kind of separating that off, like you have it structured here, more time focused for ELA and math. That can be really innovative and interesting. I'm very curious to see how that plays out. I think it will play out as has been, basically described here. I think my fuzziness is more on the next steps with grades 6 through 12, and how do you integrate into existing curricula. And so I'm quite curious to see how the MCIU training is going to go, and maybe seeing some examples of integration, over time would be very interesting, I think, for us. Now that we've got this nice little track record of Steele's presentations, it'd be nice to see the next step in that evolution. And I think having a new crop of IDS teachers for next year, I think it's pretty exciting, honestly. From a curriculum perspective, like Ms. Duffy said, we're doing something whose effects, or the effects of which, might not be felt for a while, and there should be downstream effects, in middle school and high school. So it's quite exciting. I guess one final thing, and this is something that you kind of predict. So today I was I was at a conference sponsored by the PSBA, and a guitarist when I first saw it on the program, I took a double take. Like, what? That's the speaker? Really? Like, what? Stevie Van Zandt from the E Street Band is going to be the speaker? And I'm like, what's going on? But it turns out that he has a nonprofit, or has started a nonprofit, I think about 20 years ago, that basically helps kids understand music through the history of modern pop music. And then that kind of leads to other topics within the creation of music that could relate to science or technology, et cetera. And so he actually mentioned the acronym STEAM today during his talk. And as someone who is a huge lover of the arts and practices art, with music, et cetera, I think always of the interconnection. So I go back to this integrated, the diagram from earlier. And I think that, for me, I think, okay, how do we layer the introduction of certain concepts for kids? And then how can those concepts build? You know, seeing the curriculum really as a timeline and as an evolution. And I think it is just fascinating how IDS, I can't stop thinking about how my daughter loved it so much, being such an artistic and creative kid. I think it can be a wonderful way for kids that are, other kids that are more artistically inclined, to see the science and the systematicity, so to speak, of art, of building something. So I think it's quite fascinating. My final thought is that I would like to kind of see the other end of that too, of kids that are more STEM focused and STEM oriented at some point seeing how those ideas play out in art, and maybe part of a larger conversation of the social and psychological value of art. But anyway, as you could tell, all of this stuff gets me thinking pretty big picture, so very inspiring. So thank you for giving me some airtime to share some thoughts with you. I don't have any specific questions at this time. Ms. Peterson and Jessica?
I think that it's really important for that program to emerge, like science and arts together. There's like different ways students learn. Like students can be very visual learners or very statistical, but my question was kind of backtrack off of the specific program, but I was wondering about for the PSSAs, from a student's perspective, is the test going to be the same from the 4th grade one to the 5th grade one? Or if it's going to be diagnostic, how can that test scores be beneficial for the program in general?
So the test will look different because last year in 4th grade, when the current 5th graders, when they took it in 4th grade, was science only. So this year, it's going to be part of that larger STEELS, so all the letters in that STEELS acronym: science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability. I got it. Actually remembered it. So it's going to look different in that way, and that some of the content is going to be different as some of the standards have shifted. The diagnostic pieces are tools that teachers can use to help drive their instruction, to say where my students at a given point. It's just a benchmark to say where are they, where do I really need to focus, or I taught this and my students don't know it yet, ooh, I need to go back and do it again before they're actually tested on it.
Excellent. Thank you, gents. Appreciate that. I think we might be ready, Dr. Dukevich, for our next agenda item.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kearney and Dr. Han. The final agenda item for tonight is the initiatives, district initiatives, which we did review previously. So we have it on the agenda to move forward to the full board meeting later this month.
Okay, fantastic. So now we move on to item 5, new business. Any burning new business? Okay. Public comment. Any live public comment? I don't see any. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to adjourn for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Go Phillies.
Oh, go Phils. Let's go. Oh. Well, let's hope for a better result.